What's going on, everybody? Let's talk about The Strangers Chapter 1, directed by Rennie Harlin, who has worked on a bunch of stuff, but is most known for having worked on Nightmare 4, The Dream Master, and Die Hard 2. And now, he's been tasked with creating the new trilogy for this now franchise. It stars Madeline Pesh, who is most known for being in Riverdale, and Froy Gutierrez. Shockingly, the plot stays very faithful to its predecessors, with a young couple's car basically breaking down in a small town and forcing them to stay overnight at an Airbnb nearby, and pretty much panic ensues as they are terrorized by three masked people. The twist being that they too are classified as strangers in this town, very reminiscent of An American Werewolf in London and the more recent Unwelcome. There's the smallest amount of subplot that really isn't engaging to add anything real to the experience. This may come off hypocritical or just silly, but the first 30 minutes felt like the movie was really dragging its heels hard, and I feel like most people expected that going into this. But honestly, it's more so its association with the title that made me feel like I knew the beginning was going to be slow, just because it's part of the Strangers universe. Another thing that really just gets to me is that I praise the environment being such a strong element in the story of the first film. Hell, even Prey at Night does a much better job of making use of the setting. The atmosphere here is just non-existent, especially the third act. They are literally meandering around the woods, and we're talking about a movie that's already 90 minutes. If you want to know my thoughts on how good the first film is, check out my last video where I reviewed it. My biggest issue with this film is that by making it into a trilogy, you automatically cut out the possibility of achieving the same tone as the first film. It was bleak and nihilistic, and it made it more natural to have a dark ending. For obvious reasons, that's just not possible here because you know there's a continuation to this story with the next two films. Honestly, this wouldn't be so much of a problem if they didn't literally hit every beat of the original movie, and we already know with other movies that have tried to do the whole requel thing that it just doesn't sit well with audiences. So it's just exhausting to have to see an inferior rehashing of the original film just to be able to get invested in this trilogy. For the sake of the franchise, I really do hope to see more original and unique ideas used in the following sequels to have made it worth rebooting this franchise. To be fair, the Who's Who aspect was an interesting idea. It would have been good if it was actually handled properly, although a lot of movies mess up when recreating the Clue and Scream inspired game, with very few exceptions. What comes to mind being Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. This sadly is just another one to fail at making it interesting. Wow, shocker, all the townspeople were possible suspects?
A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
Moving on to the main leads, for starters, that love and believability that the characters of James and Kristen had was just completely thrown out the window here. Generally speaking, Maya is much more optimistic and gullible, while Ryan is a bit more wary. And also, Maya was a character that became smarter as the movie went on. And that's only because in the first half of the movie, oh my god, her character decisions were so questionable. But to be fair, that criticism goes for Ryan as well. For the section where she is home alone, I found myself constantly questioning why she was reacting the way she was. Why are you going outside through the back when you already know you're vulnerable and you know for a fact there's a weird person just skulking around? What's wrong with you? That's gotta be one of the dumbest things you could do. Out of nowhere, she decides to be Edward Cullen and have a little piano moment just cuz? I know it's a cardinal sin in horror, but the fact we saw a very real solution to this movie when Ryan drove into town on the bike that was actually working, why not go with him and stay with normal people? Also, real quick, the shower scene that's in the trailer was honestly really goofy and unironically hilarious. Luckily, as the movie went on, she had some clever moments and just better character work in general. There was many moments where I thought, oh, it's a perfect moment for her to actually scream and give away her location, but she didn't. Or in the later half of the movie where she's hiding under the leaves, I thought that was a pretty good moment for her. Sadly, these were but fleeting moments of hope that would dissipate moments later when they'd prove how bad their judgment really is. While Ryan showed a lot more emotion than James from the first film, He was probably the most frustrating part of the movie for me. He just consistently made dumb decisions while simultaneously being inconsistent in other aspects. For example, he literally leaves Maya alone multiple times, even though you know there's maniacs all around the house, and they definitely know the turf more than you do. He quite literally almost killed her, because there's a moment where she is being attacked by the man in the mask, and he fires the shotgun so close to Maya's head, he could have easily killed her. One of the worst moments for him was towards the end, when he fully could have killed one of the strangers at point blank, but didn't pull the trigger. Even Pinup Girl was toying with the shotgun, because she knew he wasn't going to fire it. There were some things that I thought were neat. For starters, there was some POV shots towards the middle of the film. Basically, some of the shots are from her perspective, and it's really cool to be put basically in her shoes, and it adds to the paranoid element, feeling like it's you and not this character. Most times horror movies like POVs from the killer's perspective, mostly inspired obviously by things like Peeping Tom and Halloween, but there's a certain vulnerability when placed in the victim's shoes that I actually really liked. They sprinkle in shaky cam like in the original. Harlan didn't have to do it, but he knew that it's so synonymous with the original film that it basically is part of the experience. But at the same time, it never felt like he was overdoing it either. The crawl space scene actually had some decent suspense and tension. You knew something was gonna happen, it was just more of a matter of time. And when that nail goes in, you feel it. It goes in so smooth, it felt so real. It was very reminiscent of A Quiet Place, not just the nail itself, but the idea of having to go through something without being able to actually scream or make any noise. I'll also say, miraculously, one of the only things that they did actually change from the original is the staring from behind scene. At least it's new. He's pretty much sitting in the rocking chair behind her while she's playing the piano, but you can kind of see him in like the gold frame thing and on top of her. But that does have an asterisk, because I can't believe she wasn't able to hear him though. With the amount of creaking that happens in this house, you could literally hear a pin drop across the room. That's basically it on things that I thought were fine. To be honest, there's only one scene that I actually loved. It's a super small detail, but at the end, I just love how when Man in the Mask asks for the knife from Pinup Girl, and she hands it to him in such a cute way. She gives it to him so tenderly and lovingly. It was adorable. Ultimately, the deep dive into the lore of the Strangers, which is where these movies are presumably headed towards, bothers me because I loved the veneer of them in the first films. Hell, that's part of the scare, that you're just not supposed to know anything about them. We haven't gotten too deep into the lore yet. Outside of the masks, we quickly see like a pig mask and like a metallic one in the closet, which makes me wonder if this was a stranger's house, and that would explain why they know it so well. I may be alone in this, but some people love the first films and want to obsess over finding out who or what they are, but I just can't agree. It's just simply not my cup of tea. For what it's worth, I tried playing devil's advocate and put myself in the position of actually being curious about the purposefully empty spaces from the original. And to be candid, I felt like if they were going to flesh out more of this universe, they should have gone deeper. It felt like they played it safe, and truly I hope that Harlan's vision becomes more clear in the sequels and finds the justification of having a whole trilogy out of this IP. Overall, I'm of the opinion that the first film should have been left alone. I think the first film as a standalone is near flawless. Generally speaking, yes, the movie does leave you with some questions, I guess, like for example, why such an emphasis on the kids in the very beginning, only to never hear from them again? Or for example, like, do they just stockpile these cars of the owners that they've killed? You know, the more morally intense questions. Basically, it's an extremely daunting task of surpassing its predecessor, because its peak is hard to beat, and this film was certainly not able to step out of its shadow. But those are just my thoughts. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe. My name's Anthony, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.